Hi, what's up? It's me. It's Jeff. How you doing? Hey.
That's weird. The counter wasn't work for a second. All right, you know who I am. I'm just gonna get right into it. Chapter 49. Oh, I should say book 4, right? I think I forgot that last time. Book 4, chapter 49. Joran. Joran shuffled the letter as if by shaking it he might cause the truth to tumble out. Aeon sighed. Grundle had delivered the letter and clearly had much to say about it, but Ayanna had asked him to leave until she'd had a chance to discuss it with Joran. I wonder. This might be an Ayanna chapter. Because I'll title him who's the perspective of the chapter. But anyway, so what do you think? She stared at him, wine glass in hand, expecting some kind of wisdom.
He's your brother. He has an offer. We should at least hear him out.
Ayanna swirled the glass lazily, watching the tiny bits of sulfites as they caught the early morning light. And yet you're concerned? Maybe that's him.
And yet you're concerned.
His voice was lower, softer, almost gentle. Ayanna stood and turned to face Joran. A look he didn't recognize crossed her face. Something like wistfulness? Regret? Joran, when I was young, my father took Rainey and I to the falls south of the city. It was under some pretense, overseeing a construction project or some such thing. As usual, my father made certain we were always learning. We came to the edge of a lookout point, well away from the workers, and I saw a swarm of butterflies. Her eyes were wet with tears, her cheeks beaming. She seemed fully transported. Joran recalled seeing such looks on his own daughter's face before her death. He squeezed his fist and wished the memory away. She reached out briefly. I wanted so much to have one. The blue ones were the prettiest. I reached out and nearly got it, but the rock gave way. My father was too far away, talking to the foreman on his talkie, and I was surely going to fall. Just then, Reynold leapt to me and yanked me back. It tore my dress, and I scraped my elbow, but I was alive. She turned away, shutting her eyes tightly. Father saw the blood and beat him, thinking he'd hurt me. I screamed and screamed, but he didn't stop. Joran was surprised. He'd met Roland Stargazer, heard tell of his kindness. It was strange that he'd react in such an ugly way to his own son. Ayanna sat down with a thump. Rainey never said a word, never cried out. When father had tired of hitting him, he stormed away. I crawled over to apologize, and he smiled. He held my hand, and we cried together. Joran understood. His own brother had been a beast of a man, but as a child he'd been just as tender. What makes us lose that part of ourselves? She reached out and touched Joran on the wrist. He caught her gaze. I pray that boy still exists. You've no idea how much his decline has hurt me. Joran knelt down beside her, wincing at the pain. He squeezed her fingers, forced a smile.
Goddess willing, your prayers will be answered.
Huh. So our people have some complicated family relationships. That's interesting. Everybody's complicated. Her dad, you know, made a terrible decision. Please talk to your children, listen to them, try to figure out why they're misbehaving before you just go ahead and beat them. All right.
Your mercy,
Oh, chapter 50, Aeana.
your mercy.
Aeana shoved past the severe-looking guardswoman and stormed into the audience chamber. Her guards surged from behind, brandishing their powered weapons. Joran did his best to keep up, the pain in his knees screaming. Mother Barillon looked up from her maps. Her right hand, a lesser priest known as Cherise, raised his palms as if to say, "We're innocent." Aeana waved the letter in Barillon's face. "You are behind this." Barillon smiled, gesturing for her team to exit the chamber. They left through various curtained doorways. Cherise remained, quivering at the closest curtain. Aeana's guardians stood silently, flanking her as if ready for battle. She had warned them of Barillon's power. "Blessed Mother, please. There is no need for such dramatics. Send your guardians away, and let's discuss this reasonably, as sisters." Aeana saw her hand rise before she had a chance to forestall it. Barillon's lip curled as she prepared for the slap. Goddess, she was fearless. Moments passed. Aeana composed herself. "My brother is a disgrace to his family and his name. There is no reason he would be involved if not for your meddling." Barillon kept smiling and took a seat near the heater. She waved for Aeana to join her. Joran shrugged. Aeana sat down, her cheeks rosy with fury. "So Joran's there?" "Oh yeah, Joran did his best to keep up the pain in his knees screaming. Sorry." Barillon took a breath, then responded. "Blessed One, you must understand. This artifact is of an importance you could not imagine. My scientists have pored over it, looking for any possible explanation for its power. It is truly otherworldly." She reached for a comm device, slid the cover aside, and handed it to Aeana. As she flowed along, holographic images floated above the screen. She continued, "Though no one knows what the original people looked like, this statue offers a clue. It references components of each facet of the human organism. It contains minerals that have never been seen in such configuration. It is completely immune to magic. All our attempts to divine its history have failed. We believe it to be supernatural in both form and substance. Cherise," she pointed to the Ifriti priest, his cockeyed smile off-putting and strange, "has surmised that it could be a vessel, a carrier for a power the likes we could not imagine. Perhaps even a prison." Ayanna was beyond confused. She'd come to argue one thing, and Barillon had sandbagged her with something else. How like the old hag to come at her sideways. She'd always enjoyed keeping her subjects off balance. This is all fascinating, Barillon, but it's irrelevant to this discussion. I've come to discuss the contents of this letter. She waved it in the air before slamming it onto the coffee table. Mother, I don't. The priestess seemed genuinely confused. She reached out to touch the letter. May I? Ayanna nodded. Barillon furrowed her brow as she read. I'm sorry, Mother. I don't recognize the hand. Did this come from one of mine? She looked over at Charisse, seeming to probe his mind through facial expression. Ayanna breathed deeply. Joran leaned down to murmur in her ear.
Your mercy, this appears to be a dead end.
Barillon turned over the page. She pointed. This area. There was a private message here? Ayanna nodded. Barillon raised an eyebrow. Can you tell me anything about it? Ayanna leaned back against the chair. This whole thing was driving her insane. She looked to Joran. He had nothing. My brother. He claims to have an offer of protection for me and the others. He told us to meet him here. Barillon was genuinely surprised. Here? In the temple? My lady, I haven't seen your brother in years. A moment passed as Ayanna thought back. She remembered the day she'd found her brother in a compromising position with the elder priestess. It was before Barillon had risen to the rank of superior. Ayanna was halfway through ordination at the time. Her brother had come to bring flowers, and Barillon had given him the full tour. Later that day, Ayanna had found them in the gardens, her hands around his back, his hand beneath her habit. It was a minor scandal, or at least it would have been, had Barillon not begged her to keep it secret. The next 5 years had been tense in the extreme. The one good thing had been that Barillon's inappropriate overtures had ceased. Occasionally, Ayanna would hear rumors of her brother visiting the priestess at her various assignments. The last was on Thermopylae, just after Ayanna had arrived on Antares 1. That was 6 months ago. Which meant Barillon was lying. Why? Ayanna stared at her. The moments stretched along, neither appearing to break. Gratefully, someone entered the chamber and shouted, Beloved mother, you have a visitor. Both women looked to the curtain as a swarm of nobles and their retinues flooded the chamber. At the head of the phalanx, one man strode. My lord. Barillon dropped to one knee. Ayanna stood, squinting her eyes to make sense of the scene. It was Durian, the man from Mother's party. Had she missed the memo? Who was he? Had her mother sent him? The old creep looked into her eyes with an expression of affection.
My dear, so good of you to come. Please, let us retire to the lower depths.
He stretched out his arm to direct their attention to a far wall. A pair of acolytes had drawn back the curtain, revealing a set of double doors covered with mystical symbols. The doors slid quietly open to reveal a candle-lit staircase leading down into the earth. Of course, like with everything, her mother's flair for the dramatic was on display. Just then, she recognized Captain Sandemon of Thermopylae near the back of the crowd, clutching a gilded messenger bag. What's the movie star doing here? Am I on drugs? She knew even without looking. Barillon was loving this. Hell yeah. Love it. God, I just love the bitterness between Aeona and Barillon. So much fun. Chapter 51. Portillion, you've been summoned. He rushed to the door. It was her. Therese, the jewel of the tower. She was clad in the simple white tunic of the acolyte, her hair tightly bound into braids and tucked under a white twill cap. In her hands was a small scroll tube. She appeared distressed. He opened the door a crack and looked up and down the hallway. Your mercy, what is it? She handed him the scroll and gestured for him to leave the apartment. He did so. As they walked, he read it carefully.
Portillion, I have discovered the truth about your condition. Come at once. Elian.
The matriarch! What on earth could she know? What did it mean? He wanted desperately to flee, to go anywhere but to the old crone. Would she punish him for his sins of the spirit? Gods, but he was petrified. Therese gripped his arm tightly. Portillion, you must hurry. There is little time. She led him through an endless maze of corridors and hidden passages. For an office tower, this building was remarkably appointed with secrets. He wondered which of the great houses had built it. They exited a secret staircase and came to a small room, decorated with delicate furniture and wrought iron lamps. The matriarch was seated in a high-backed wicker chair, leaning against a thick orange cushion. When Portillion entered, she motioned for him to sit. Therese hovered briefly. The matriarch pointed to another door.
Wait in there, child.
Therese moved to go.
Lock this door, if you please.
Therese produced a key from around her neck and locked the door they'd come in through. It sounded very sturdy, gears winding and bars chunking into place. She dipped her head and shuffled noiselessly out the side door. Portillion was at a loss. The matriarch took his hand. She waited until he was looking in her eyes before speaking.
Portillion, as you may have guessed, I am dying.
Beloved mother! She shushed him.
Quiet. The walls are thick, but there's no need to arouse the ears of our enemies.
Enemies? Gods, what intrigue! She squeezed his hand.
I am dying, and when I do, a successor will be chosen. It is my desire that the burden pass to Sister Stargazer.
Portillion's eyes widened. She squeezed his hand again.
She is more powerful than any other priestess, and twice as good. She surrounds herself with trusted, loyal advisors, and she has something no other sister with the true gift has: the love of the people.
Hold on. Fucking updates. Every night I click remind me tomorrow. One of these days I'll do an update.
And she has something no other sister with a true gift has: the love of the people.
He nodded. It was all true. But she was so young, barely a woman, hardly or barely out of her first assignment. Portillion couldn't believe what he was hearing.
Therese mentioned my condition.
He felt himself wriggling in his seat. He endeavored to relax. Oh, I'm sorry. Therese mentioned my condition. He felt himself wriggling in his seat. He endeavored to relax.
Yes, that. You must know that Sister Ayanna values you very highly, and she will need you when the time comes to engage the dark forces of our enemies. A change is coming. I can feel it. No doubt you have felt it as well.
Portillion nodded. Yes, Mother.
What you discovered on that asteroid will change our reality. It will unlock powers that have not been felt in generations, and only a select few of you will have the skill necessary to wield them. You have the gift, but also you have been touched by it. She squeezed his hand again and turned it, palm up, on her lap. You have been cursed with a traveling spirit, a beast of the ancient world. You and your men released it from the earth when you uncovered the artifact, and it haunts you to this day. You are aware of this, yes?
Portillion nodded. His words stuck in his throat. She patted his hand.
Good. I can tell that it frightens you. It should. This entity is extremely powerful. I don't know if you will ever be free of it, but if you have the courage, you can harness its power to aid you in your work.
He was floored. He'd feared as much, but he had hoped that she or some other individual might be able to release him. The thought of using it hadn't even occurred to him. Could he truly keep this dark spirit from consuming his soul?
Events are moving quickly now. We are at the threshold of a new world, one in which all people of conscience will be compelled to fight for the soul of humanity itself. You are such a one, Portillion.
She patted his hand again and rose creakily to her feet. He helped her to the door, and Therese took her arm. She looked up into his eyes.
Say your goodbyes, my son. The time is fast approaching.
Portillion nodded. Yes, beloved mother. The door shut, leaving him alone. How do I get out of here? Well, that chapter was pretty long. Fucking Elion, the matriarch. Love that lady. So cool. So, you didn't think Ayanna had enough power? She's gonna have more, probably. That's exciting. All right. Well, stay tuned. Next up, Grendel. Oh, if you haven't heard, if for some reason you're listening to this first, check out all my shows. Something Wonderful Right Away, Good Idea, Everything is Awesome, The War for the Tower, and I'm forgetting one. There's 5. What's the other one? Shattered Worlds RPG, the one set in this universe. All right. The universe of this book, not, this. Whatever. All right.